Broncos football is not quite back. It's back when they play the Raiders week 1. This is the unpopular opinion that I will continue to preach even if everyone on Twitter disagrees with me, or I guess everyone on X disagrees with me. But I can say that Broncos training camp is back. And we have a lot to discuss as the veterans have reported, and we're going to get pads on in the next week. We're going to get some practices. We're going to get some 11-on-11 drills. We're going to get a lot to talk about as we have been starved for actual football. And we're still not quite there at actual football. That does not come into the regular season, in my opinion, but we will get our first glimpse and look of the 2023 Broncos because that really doesn't happen in OTAs or minicamp, in my humble opinion, but we will get some contact drills, and that's at least a step in the right direction. So welcome into a live Broncos breakdown. A lot to discuss on today's show with new helmets being introduced, training camp, like we just talked about, pretty much underway, and we have some Wazurike replacements to go through after the defensive tackle was suspended for the next 365 days indefinitely. But before we get to all that, let me know where you are watching from today. Shout out your city. If you chime in the live chat, I'll be giving you a shout out. So while we let the audience build up, while we let everyone click on the notification, file in, and find their seat, let me know where you are watching from. We've got Hawaii in the house. We have Timor in Salina, Kansas. Love to see it. We've got Lakewood, Colorado, Monument, Colorado. What's going on, Javante? We've got Ernie in San Diego, California, Chico, California, Tucson, Arizona in the house from Michael. We've got Colorado represented, California represented. How about Sioux Falls, South Dakota? Love to see it. Continue to chime in down below, and while you are getting your city in the chat, I want to share Denver's new alternate helmet with everyone here. I'm a fan of it. I mean, the team has been teasing us and blue balling us for the last couple of months, hinting at some whiteouts, some white caps and whatnot, and they represent a huge part of the state of Colorado with a nod to the white-capped mountains surrounding the state, and they implement that into their new helmets with also a bit of a nod and a hat tip back to the throwback logo with the bucking Bronco, if you will, peeking out of the Denver D. And they got a nice stripe over the top as well. That's my best breakdown of the artistic side to the new helmets. But just right off the cuff, do you like the new helmets? What are our thoughts on the new helmets? I'm a fan. I haven't really seen anyone come out and say they're bad or they're ugly. They're going to wear these new helmets with their alternate orange uniforms, so we're not going to see them every single week. It'll only be periodically throughout the season, maybe once or twice, but I'm a fan. Mark me down as a fan of these new alternate helmets, and also mark me down as someone who is buying into this being a step in, whether or not you believe it's the right direction, I think it is a direction they are headed, which is new uniforms on the horizon. Damani Leach, the team president, who's had that role for about a year or so at this point, has talked about new uniforms being implemented and being, on the table for the team. And I think this is something the team will look into, and this is the first step in that direction, whether you like it or not. But what do we think? Do we like the new helmets? Wow. The first thing I see is Rakeem Brown saying no. Looks like a D2 college helmet. If that were to be true, and I don't think it is true, I don't think it looks like a D2 college helmet, that would be the coolest Division II football team out there. So, Rakeem, I don't know what D2 school you're rooting on, but, I mean, if you ever watched Last Chance U, ECCU, East Mississippi Community College, whatever it is, they had some elite uniforms for the Lions. We got some yeses coming in from Javante. Ernie says yes. Garrett says yes. Miller says better. We've got 9527 saying no, it looks like college helmet. What are we talking about, people? I don't think it looks like a college helmet. Also, what's the difference between a pro helmet and a college? I mean, college helmets tend not to have logos on it, I guess. I don't even know what you could say separates college helmets from pro helmets in terms of look or style. I mean, I feel like pro helmets tend to be a bit cleaner, meaning a little less going on, whether it's just a plain backdrop and the logo on it, whereas college helmets can get a bit more artistic and colorful. And sure, this has a logo and stripes over the top, but that doesn't really make it a non-professional helmet. I don't really know how something looks like a college helmet. I mean, it's not like an Oregon helmet. It's not that. It's not like they put the Rocky Mountains with a transparent background on it. So I don't really see that. I'm not buying that. So hard disagree from my end on this not being an absolute home run A-plus helmet. So with that being said, kind of snowballing, no pun intended, off the Rocky white helmets, do you want new uniforms? I think this would be the next conversation where if the fan base reacts to these alternate helmets with a very positive reaction, well, the team and the ownership are going to go, maybe this is a sign that these fans are ready for something new, something different, and it's time to switch things up a little bit because the current uniforms, not bad. I don't dislike them. I've got no issues with them, but if an alien came down and power ranked all 32 NFL uniforms, would it be top 10? Probably not. Maybe. It's all up to everyone's individual taste. There's a lot of bias that goes into it. Not many teams or not many fan bases rag on their own uniforms. But how often do you see someone wearing a Broncos uniform that's not a Broncos fan, right? Whereas sometimes you see people that aren't really invested in the NFL still snag a jersey because they like the jersey. I don't know how often I've seen someone like that for the Broncos. That's the point I'm trying to make here. So I'm open to it for sure. I think there is room for improvement, right? Whereas some teams are sitting pretty rather, and they might not look and see an opportunity to upgrade because they think they're towards the top at least for their stylistic opinion. Now, one last question before we jump into today's live show. Should the Broncos sign Shelby Harris? Would you like to see a reunion between Shelby Harris and this team? Chime in for me in the comment section. Y for yes, N for no. Just want to get the pulse of everyone watching right now. When it comes to re-signing's a bizarre term. Signing, just because he had that one-year stint in Seattle. Are we in or are we out? Yes or no? I'm in. Hand up. I am in on Shelby Harris coming back to this team for a couple of reasons, but the big one is you are the victor of the Russell Wilson trade. If you get Shelby Harris back after dealing him to Seattle, that is how historians will look back on this trade and go, I think you got to give it to Denver. They were able to get Russell Wilson and swindle Shelby Harris back. We are one offseason away from Noah Fant and Drew Lock coming back, and then getting all the pieces of that trade, minus some draft picks that I don't even remember what they were, right? First, second, third, it's too hard to remember. That was so long ago. Who holds on to that stuff? I don't know. We got some yeses coming in. Roger says yes. Bradley says yes. Ernie says yes. Tamor says yes. Joanne says yes. Let me know. Garrett saying yes. Hey, if you like the content, by the way, we do here, liking the video, believe it or not, goes a really long way. I don't know if you're a big YouTube person or if you only chime in every so often, but yes, if you guys like the video, that would go a long way. So if you enjoy the content we're doing here, consider liking the video. It would be greatly appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we do have a mailbag at the end of the show. So now is your opportunity to get on screen because here at Chat Sports, we're all about two-way conversations. I want to hear from all of our viewers. So if you've got a burning question or something you want answered, hashtag Broncos in the chat. If you want to skip the line, you can super chat. I'm actually in the midst of watching like a 90-minute documentary about Disney's Fast Pass system. Hand up, I'm kind of an adult Disney person. I haven't been in like 2 years, which for me sounds long, but for other people sounds very short. But it's pretty insane, the history behind their Fast Pass system. But the point I want to make is this is our Fast Pass system. If you want to skip the line, get ahead of everyone in the chat, super chat, we'll toss it on screen immediately. And that way everyone watching now and then later on can see what your thoughts are, what your take is, or what your question is. So super chats are always appreciated. Now coming up on the show, we've got some Wazurike. I'm kind of happy that I no longer have to worry about pronouncing that name, at least for the next 364 days. Replacements, and we'll talk about the new helmets, my reaction and whatnot. And then some players to watch at training camp, some under-the-radar guys, if you will. And then that live mailbag like we just talked about. So all that coming up and a little bit more during today's live Broncos Breakdown. all made possible because of producer Matthew McCullough behind the scenes, grinding away, getting us into a spot where we could go live today. So everyone shout out to Big Tex in the chat. Do we have the green light? I got the thumbs up. Okay. If you have not liked the video, 68 people watching, 18 likes. Hit that thumbs up button. Would be greatly appreciated. And let's jump into a live Broncos breakdown. Coming up on today's show, we are going to look at some Wazurike replacements for the Broncos after the second-year defensive tackle was suspended indefinitely for 365 days. Before we look at some replacement options, let's talk about the biggest news item, if you will, in Denver right now, and that is the new alternate helmets have been released. And mark me down as a big fan. If I'm giving it a letter grade, I'm giving it an A. It's a nod to the state's, environmental background with the whiteout, with a nod, like I said, to the white-capped mountains in Denver and in Colorado specifically, all across the state. But also you're getting that nice throwback Denver D with a bucking Bronco coming out the middle of it, a logo that's one of the more underappreciated nationwide throwback logos, if you will. And then you got the stripe over the top of the helmet. I mean, you guys can see it for yourselves. I'm a big fan. And they're going to wear it with their alternate uniforms, the orange one. So haven't seen any games announced that they're wearing it for just yet. Probably going to see it for 2, maybe 3 games. I doubt they just do 1. There's just been so much anticipation for these new alternate helmets. It would feel like a bit of, a deflating balloon if they only did it for 1 game. So hopefully we get it for at least 2 games this season. It would be 2 home games. I mean, off the top of my head, home games, that could be fun. Not going to do it week 1 against the Raiders. Like, you don't want, a kind of, I would say distraction, but another storyline added to the first game. Don't have that be the center of conversation. Don't have people being distracted even the slightest bit for the Raiders. Chiefs could be fun. Chargers could be fun. What about the Vikings? Sunday Night Football at home after the Bills game? Yeah, mark me down right now. Sean Payton, I know you're watching, so take some notes. Get a pen and paper out, please. I would like for the Vikings game to be a throwback uniform game. So just jot that down so you don't forget. But let me know, do you like the new uniforms, and do you want new uniforms? I mean, do you like the new helmets? Sure, but do you want new uniforms? Because I do think this might be a snowball effect where Damani Leach, the team president, is going to get a bit of a pulse of Broncos Country and go, all right, pretty good reception to the new alternate helmets. Maybe this could turn into some new uniforms down the road. Now let's get on to some Wazurike replacement options. And option number 1 for replacing the former Iowa State Cyclone is internal, right? Looking interior, looking at your own depth chart and looking at your own roster and seeing what you have in the backyard as for who could step up and take his spot. And when we look at the depth chart, I don't think was going to be a starting job. Maybe if he had a great training camp, sure. I don't think Jonathan Harris or Matt Henningsen or Tyler Lancaster has cemented themselves as a starting player after Zach Allen and DJ Jones. No one really has in my eyes, but there are some guys on this roster who could step up into that role and take what was supposed to be a bit of a sophomore leap. Tyler Lancaster is one name to keep an eye on. He was just signed a few months ago. He missed all of last season after getting hurt in training camp with the Raiders. But prior to that with the Green Bay Packers, sure, the stats don't really jump out to you, but he's not playing a position where he's going to have a bunch of great stats, right? He's a 1 to 3 technique defensive tackle who's going to clog up the middle of the offensive line and free up linebackers to do their job. So Lancaster is a name to keep an eye on. Matt Henningsen, a late day 3 draft pick from Wisconsin last year. He kind of turned his game on towards the second half of the season. Finished with 21 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. I've seen some people already pencil him in as a starter. I truthfully don't have an answer for you as to who this week 1 starter will be next to DJ Jones. We can all make predictions, but I don't think anyone can concretely say this is going to be your starter and here are 5 reasons why or something. And then your final replacement option, I don't know if we really call it a replacement actually the more I talk about it, but Jonathan Harris, just because Wazurike was trying to replace Jonathan Harris in this starting role. But Harris has been a guy who's lived out of his suitcase. He's bounced around the league. Last year with Denver, he missed some time due to injury, limited to about half the season. But Harris is someone who could be in line for maybe a bigger workload than expected now that Wazurike is not in that rotation. Before we get on to the rest of the replacement options, I just want to give some shout-outs really quickly to our recent subscribers. Really appreciate everyone who has subscribed to the channel and helped us grow. The Beast Viper, Austin Delie, Teddy Kearney, Orange Crush 7, and Mark Johnson. Sorry for the names I pretty much butchered in the middle there, but hey, shout out to everyone who has subscribed. And if you want to get a shout out on a future show, subscribe, and we're all about giving back here at the Broncos Breakdown. Now, the second option, and albeit the more fun option, or at least the more exciting one, is free agency, because fans of every team in every professional sports league always want to look external, always want to see if there's a bigger, better name on the street that their team could sign and bring onto their roster. So here are some free agent defensive tackles. We talked about this in yesterday's video. Shelby Harris, who we'll look at. Matt Ioannidis, he was with the Washington, I think he might have been a Redskin, football team, and maybe he was not a Commander. So he's been two things, I think, in Washington. But most recently with the Carolina Panthers, he's a really solid defensive tackle. Frankly, I'm surprised he's still a free agent. But Shelby Harris is a name to keep an eye on because, of course, he knows a thing or two about this team, playing with the Broncos for a long stretch of time. He was even their sack leader not too long ago. In his final season in Denver, he posted 6 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. Someone who's always been pretty reliable, I could say. I mean, you're not going to find a lot of guys out there that have never missed a game. Otherwise, they probably would have been signed at this point. But you can see he's played a lot of football over the last 4 seasons. But last year in Seattle, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. I don't have a good reason for you as to why Shelby Harris is unsigned. I mean, PFF is not the end-all, be-all. But when they've got someone ranked in the top 20 for interior defensive linemen out of 127 qualifying players, sure, being 31 years old doesn't help. But I'm inclined to believe that even if PFF has a 10%, range of margin of error, and he's not 17, but he's closer to 30 in NFL GM's eyes, finding a top 30 defensive tackle from last year still on the market is pretty appealing to me. So I would love to see a Shelby Harris reunion in Denver, but let me know what your thoughts are. Should the Broncos bring back Shelby Harris? S for sign or P for pass. If you think it's time to move on and close that chapter, fine. But you know what? I think Shelby Harris has some good football left in the tank. And the defensive line is a group that I have some questions about. Like, the big question in Denver, of course, is can Sean Payton turn around Russell Wilson? That's all great and dandy. And that's the biggest question. But if we're really getting into the nitty-gritty and getting into the weeds on this, is this defensive line going to have any bite to it, or is it all bark? Because Zach Allen only has a career high of 5.5 sacks in the season. DJ Jones was average last year, probably not as, living up to the billing as to what he was paid in free agency. And then there's a big question mark as to who's that next starting defensive lineman in a 3-4 front. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. The other guys we talked about, I should verbalize Ndamukong Suh. He's just a big name at this point. I don't think he'll sign anywhere during training camp. He probably doesn't want to be working out under the hot August sun. But Matthew Ioannidis last year, 5 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Chris Wormley's a guy who, like Wazurike, has a lot of versatility and has bounced around the defensive line. William Golston is more of your traditional defensive end. He had 4 tackles for loss, last year with the Buccaneers, but he can be a really good defensive end to set the edge for offensive linemen. I think the Broncos ultimately are going to just be hawks on the NFL transaction wire, and they will be monitoring cuts league-wide. Now, this year, there is no set date of going from 90 to 85, 85 to 80. You just got to go from 90 to 53. So you're probably going to see cuts slowly trickle out league-wide when players aren't looking the part or teams know, hey, you're not going to make this roster, so we're actually going to do you a solid. We're going to release you now. That way other teams have an opportunity to look at some of your tape and some of your film and make a decision and not have it be some chaotic mad rush in September on that 53-man roster cut down day. So keep an eye on that transaction wire, as the Broncos will surely be monitoring other teams' second and third string defensive linemen. Before we get on to our third option for replacing Wazurike, there is an awesome sale right now I think you guys should know about for Pat Surtain jerseys. Now, the blue uniforms might not be in your size, but the road white uniforms are in all sizes right now. So go to chatsports.com/Surtain jersey. I've included that link in the copy, the description, and the comment section of today's video. So if you want to get a Pat Surtain jersey at all, do it now, because these sales on Fanatics come and go. And if you put it off for even 24, 48 hours, well, when you go back in 2 to 3 days, that sale's gone and now you're paying $20, $30 more dollars. So don't wait any longer. Get it right now if you're looking for a new number 2 jersey. Third option for replacing Wazurike, everyone's favorite, trades. It's always fun to talk about trades. We're all suckers to it. They don't happen too often, but George Payton has proven that he is not afraid to pick up the phone. I'll preface with this. I don't see a big name trade happening, right? It's not like their starting defensive tackle, Zach Allen or DJ Jones, got suspended. It would feel like a bit of overkill to make a big splash trade, or at least a high-profile name, or at least a recognizable name, even for your above-average NFL fan, to replace someone who is just going to be maybe at the very high end, the third guy in this 5-man rotation, 6-man rotation. But more likely, he was supposed to be that 4 to 5-man spot in this 6-man defensive line rotation. So if there is a trade, it's going to be like a low-level trade. I don't think you're going to see a big splash name. Now, there are some trade targets out there I want to bring up to your attention. Neville Gallimore is a guy for the Cowboys who, third-round pick, I believe, and he's been kind of like what Wazurike was supposed to be, where someone who just never quite took that big step forward in their career and established themselves as a day one starter for all 17 games. Matthew Butler with the Raiders, you don't see divisional trades happen too often, but he kind of had some issues in Vegas last year, a healthy scratch for a large portion of the season. So maybe a change of scenery, or maybe getting away from McDaniels would be good for him. Eddie Goldman is interesting. At one time, he was one of the best defensive tackles in football with the Chicago Bears back in 2018 when their defense looked like the monsters in the midway. The issue is that Goldman, the last 3 years, has only played one season. He opted out in 2020. He played below average in 2021. Then he was a free agent in the offseason of 2022, signed with the Falcons. 2 weeks later, he retires. Now, he has decided to come out of retirement, so he went back to Atlanta. But maybe the Falcons are like, dude, we kind of moved on from you. We don't have a spot for you on this roster. So there is a spot in Denver. Let's make a deal happen. Finally, this would be like a home run kind of reach trade if you're looking for something like that. Javon Kinlaw, former first-round pick for the 49ers, has never really been healthy, has not been consistent. He has not been reliable in the Bay Area. So if the 49ers are kind of looking to just move on from Kinlaw, maybe Denver would go, you know what? We still don't really have a long-term piece at defensive tackle, so let's take a chance on Javon Kinlaw. That one seems a bit more unlikely than the rest of them, but you never quite know with the Payton duo. So who do you guys think should replace Eyioma Uwazurike? We went through some internal options, some free agents, some trades. Let me know in the comment section. It's always good to hear back from our reviewers here at the Broncos Breakdown who you think should replace the former Cyclone. To wrap up the show, you guys know the dealio by now. My summer hot takes to get us through the off-season, because you know what? Football's not back in the training camp. Football's not back in the preseason. Football is back week 1 against the Raiders. How do I know that? Because there was a whole different buzz about the regular season versus the preseason. But it is a high of 97 degrees, a heat wave coming through Denver right now. So this has to be a very hot first take hot. And my first take hot take is that the Rams do a complete blow-up after this season, and they trade either Aaron Donald or Cooper Kupp. We're only 18 months removed from the Rams hoisting the Lombardi Trophy, but things have already kind of gotten a bit sour. At least some of the reports that were leaking this offseason between Stafford and the Rams, it just doesn't feel like things are going in the right direction, and they kind of look like honestly the 2015 Broncos at this point, where the next season was like, okay, I guess we're still okay, but not really. I mean, at least Denver the next year went above 500, but then very quickly things spiraled and things went downhill, and all of a sudden no one even thought of them as that, team to compete, team to watch for in the playoffs. So I think the Rams are on that same path where, hey, Denver got a Super Bowl out of it, LA got a Super Bowl out of it, everyone's happy, but I don't think it's going to be a long, consistent team to watch for in the NFC. So I could see a big blow up happening after this year. That will do it for us on today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed our content, consider subscribing. It would go a long way to help support the channel. Like the video, comment, all that good stuff. We'll see everyone later. Who do you guys think should replace Wazurike? Let me know in the comments. I've got Miller saying I would love a Shelby Harris signing. I would too. I don't know if Shelby Harris is unsigned because of his own doing, where like he's waiting for the right team to call and he goes, hey, I know that I don't have too many years left in the league. I've only gotten offers from the Texans and the Texans, the Colts, the other crappy football teams, the Patriots. I mean, I never thought I'd say that with crappy. But he's waiting for a contender to call, and maybe that one doesn't call, and he goes, all right, Denver's interested. They needed a guy on the defensive line. I still have my place back in Mile High. Let's just move on home. So who do you guys want to see replace him? We've got some more helmet chatter going on. Javon Kinlaw might be good from Garrett. Okay. When it comes to the helmets, I'm a fan. I am a fan. No doubt about it. But we have another segment to get to on today's show. We're going to look at some under-the-radar guys to watch for at training camp. Once again, if you are just tuning in and you would not like the video, it would go a long way to support the channel, so please go ahead and do so. I would greatly appreciate it. Big text, big thumbs up. That's what I'm talking about, baby. Let's jump into some under-the-radar guys to watch for at Broncos training camp. Coming up on today's show, we are going to look at some under-the-radar players to watch for at Denver's training camp, which is now underway. So welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here, starting off with a wide receiver as an under-the-radar guy, Marquez Callaway. So a former New Orleans Saint, stop me if you've heard this before, has come and followed Sean Payton to the Mile High City. And he might not be a guy that everyone knows about right now, but I think he's going to make a name for himself during the preseason because he's going to get a lot of reps and opportunities in the preseason. And I think Callaway is someone that's going to do a lot of good things for the Broncos this year. We're going to throw some of his stats on the screen and whatnot throughout the show, but Marquez Callaway is someone that has some deep threat potential to him, right? I want to show you some stats really quickly here of Marquez Callaway and some other players in the NFL. Like, compare his numbers in 2021 to Courtland Sutton last season, and I just tossed out Terry McLaurin as kind of a reference point, if you will, because I want to show you guys what these guys can do when it comes to stretching the field. Marquez Callaway in 2021 had 46 grabs. He averaged 15.1 yards reception, and he had 7 receptions that I deem as a big play, 20 or more yards. Compare that to Courtland Sutton, who had 11 of those 20-plus yard receptions, but off of 64 receptions. So the hope is that Marquez Callaway can come in here and be a big play factor for Denver, something that they are really missing when it comes to the wide receivers. And then to compare that to just, I would say a really good receiver in Terry McLaurin, he is leaps and bounds ahead of those guys, and that's what Denver is trying to get to. But Marquez Callaway, his breakout year in 2021 for the New Orleans Saints, 84 targets, 46 receptions, 698 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Unfortunately, he took a step back that next season, but I think Callaway can be someone that in a rotation as the wide receiver 4 or 5 or whatever in this offense can offer you some upside as a return man. He did that in college at Tennessee, and then in New Orleans, he had a habit of making some good punt returns in his rookie season. That's really how he found a spot on the Saints roster as a UDFA, and then he grew as a wide receiver. Now, last year in the Big Easy, it wasn't good as we just looked at the stats, But altogether, it wasn't really good for New Orleans. I mean, they had a quarterback change midway through the year. Head coach Dennis Allen isn't the smartest bulb. Go look at what he did when he was the Raiders head coach. But I think Callaway's a name that you might not know right now, but you're going to know as the preseason continues. Now, grade Denver's wide receiver room for me. A, B, C, D, or F. Between Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, and I'm going to put Marvin Mims as that fourth guy. What kind of grade does it warrant in your eyes? It doesn't have a true apex star yet, but if Jerry Jeudy becomes that apex guy, man, Denver's receiver room goes from like a B to an A in my eyes. Moving on to the second under-the-radar player to watch for, how about Jonathon Cooper, former 7th-round pick out of Ohio State that has somewhat been buried on Denver's outside linebacker depth chart. I mean, when we look at the Broncos linebacker room as a whole, Frank Clark and Randy Gregory are your two starting guys on the outside. Baron Browning is going to miss the foreseeable future as he comes off knee surgery. Nick Bonito needs to take a big step forward, but there's good old Jay Cooper in the bottom left side of your screen. And Cooper is someone who's kind of in the grass right now, but he's going to get opportunities. And last year and the season before that, his first 2 years in the NFL, the numbers don't scream out to you like this is a guy who's about to have a breakout season. 2 sacks a year ago, but 2 sacks, 2.5 sacks, 4.5 sacks in his NFL career as someone who's only had a couple of starts. Like, to me, it looks like he might not be a 10-plus sack player. But if he gets a lot of snaps and he gets a lot of, opportunities, he could make the most of that, and he could turn 2 sacks with more playing time into 5 or 6 sacks. And hey, finding 6 sacks from a 7th-round pick was like a huge win for the Broncos. Plus, with Baron Browning out, and I just can't rely on Randy Gregory to save my life, I think Jonathon Cooper is going to get more snaps, more playing time, and we're going to see more of the former Buckeye. And what I've seen so far, I've liked, so I'm excited to see what he can do if he gets more of an opportunity, and that's coming in 2023. The third player that's an under-the-radar guy is defensive end Matt Henningsen. The 7th-round pick, out of Wisconsin last season, had a okay rookie season. But when I look at Denver's defensive line, I just don't know who's starting next to DJ Jones. Like, I know Zach Allen's starting. I know DJ Jones is starting. But Jonathan Harris, Tyler Lancaster, Matt Henningsen, Mike Purcell, like there is a battle to be had now that Wazurike is out of the mix for that last defensive end position. So with Zach Allen and DJ Jones being the only guarantees on that front 3 defensive line, Matt Henningsen has an opportunity to take a starting job by the reins and hold on to it. Now, last year, he had some good in the games down the stretch. 21 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 1 sack. But we didn't see a whole lot of him early on. And honestly, did we really see a whole lot of any rookies last year? Like Nick Bonito, more or less redshirt of the year, along with Wazurike. Matt Henningsen, not so much. Luke Wattenberg, what we did see, we didn't like to see. So this is an opportunity for last year's rookie class to get more of an opportunity and to make the most of it if they get the chance. Now, some other metrics I want to share with you guys for Mr. Henningsen. PFF grades from last season. 63.1. I know 63 out of 100 doesn't sound like a good grade, but for someone who was buried on the depth chart as a rookie and a late day 3 draft pick, those are pretty good starting numbers in the NFL and a good spot to build off of. Good against the run, 70.1. Just not a very good pass rusher. And hey, if you don't want to bring him in on 3rd and 10, don't do that then. But have him come in on 1st and 2nd down, early downs when you're expecting the run, and that's where he can be at his best. Then on 3rd down, when it's 3rd and 11, you're trying to get after the quarterback, take him off and get Baron Browning, Randy Gregory, Frank Clark, and Jonathon Cooper, all of your best pass rushers on the field at once. Before we get on to the rest of our under-the-radar players, if you are enjoying the content here at the Broncos Breakdown, you know how YouTube works. The more subscribers we get, the more studio space we get, and then that means more content for you, the viewers at home. So consider subscribing if you have not already. It would go a long way. 4th player that's an under-the-radar guy, and I'm kind of breaking my own rule here of no rookies because how can you be under the radar as a rookie? But Drew Sanders, the more I think about Drew Sanders in this defense, the more I really start to like what Denver did in day 2 of this year's draft. Because when we look at Denver's inside linebacker room, you've got great pieces in Josie Jewell, who I was a huge fan of last year. Alex Singleton re-signs and finally gets paid, and someone I doubted when they signed him last offseason, and he came in the clutch last year when Jonas Griffith and Josie Jewell both dealt with injuries early in the season. But Drew Sanders, the guy is a franchise linebacker in my eyes. He's someone that you could see building a defense around, right? Someone who could be in the middle of the defense for 2 contracts, right? 4 years on his rookie deal, and then another 3 to 4 years on his second contract. Getting 8 years out of an inside linebacker who you took in the second day of the NFL draft feels like a very big win for the Broncos, and I think Drew Sanders can be that player. You look at what he did last season in Arkansas after transferring from Alabama, a former 5-star recruit, 9.5 sacks, 13.5 tackles for loss. The guy put up crazy good numbers as an inside linebacker. I mean, you would think those numbers would be someone coming off the edge. No, he's one of the best blitzing off-ball linebackers in football, and he's going to bring that mentality to the Broncos. His PFF grades from his final season at Arkansas, 79.2 overall. PFF does not grade college players very lightly. It's not easy to impress them. So to find 79.2 overall grade, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why he didn't go undoubtedly top 10. He's not a perfect linebacker. He has some issues in coverage, but then again, 77.8. He picked off Ben DiNucci. I don't think his coverage issues are as big as some people make him out to be, but I'm a huge fan of Drew Sanders, and I think everyone watching this video, when you watch preseason games, the first time you watch him play, you're going to go, who is that guy? Because you all have that little moment. We have to get refamiliarized with all the new players and their new jersey numbers. So you're going to go to the Broncos website, look at the roster, and go, oh, holy shit, that's the Arkansas guy, Drew Sanders. Like, he is really good. Everyone's going to get to that point, that first preseason game against Arizona. And I'm just going to say, if Drew Sanders gets the opportunity to start in 2023, whether that's because Jewell or Singleton gets injured or for whatever reason, once he gets that starting role, even if it's just for 1 week or that's the plan, he ain't giving up that starting role. Like, I think he's the kind of guy that could come in and after a couple of weeks and getting the hang of things and getting the NFL speed down and getting in some good reps on special teams, if he comes in and starts for you in week 6 or 7, he is going to ball out, and there's just no way a coaching staff could look at that and go, well, thank you for your 1 game of service. We're going to go back to the old starter now. Not with Drew Sanders. I think he's got that type of ceiling and potential. 5th and final under-the-radar player is Luke Wattenberg, the former Washington Husky. We won't go too in-depth on Mr. Wattenberg, but here's my 2 cents on this. He was bad last year. If you don't remember because you didn't really want to care to watch the last couple of games, I can't really blame you for that, or at least not watch too passionately of the offensive line. But he was bad. He played a couple games, and it was not good. But, big but, Cushenberry is not much better. And he does not have this starting job sewed up and locked up so that there's no competition to be had. So if you're Wattenberger's like level after last season, if there's one position to be on this team, it is center. Because the other spots, like if he was a wide receiver, I don't think there'd be much conversation about him even making this roster after the way he played last year. But because he is at the center position where Denver has a question mark, a good training camp and a good preseason to bounce back after a sluggish rookie year, he could find himself in the mix to win that starting job. To wrap up the show, you know what we like to do. First take a hot take for our summer hot takes today because it is a high of 93 degrees. At least that's what the weatherman said as I record this during our live show on Tuesday at 3 o'clock Mountain Time. So my first hot take is Sean Payton will be in the running for NFL Coach of the Year. I feel like I kind of pussied out for this first hot take, but you know what? Sean Payton is one of the best NFL head coaches out there, and I think he's going to get some traction. Now, we know that in order to win Coach of the Year, you can't be Andy Reid, right? Because the expectations with Andy Reid and the Chiefs are so high that if he gets to 12 or 13 wins, people are just going to go, well, he was supposed to. He has Patrick Mahomes. But when you're coaching a team that won 5 games last year, you turn 5 wins into 10 wins, you're going to get some attraction. And if your name is Sean Payton, you're going to have that notoriety. And if you do that with a team that everyone kind of crossed off and said, oh, they're a bust, that Russell Wilson trade is going to be awful, there's no way they bounce back from that. Well, I'm here to remind you, Denver lost 9 one-score games last season. Like, they went toe-to-toe with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Ravens were a different team last year without Lamar Jackson, who they lost in that game. But the point is, the Broncos had a lot of one-score games against teams that had very successful seasons, which just goes to show there's talent on this roster, and despite how bad the coaching staff was last year and the quarterback play in general, they were able to overcome that and at least keep themselves competitive and in games. So all Sean Payton has to come in here and do is fix Russell Wilson. Not a very light thing to do, but he also just has to correct some minor adjustments because they were 90% of the way there in a lot of games last year. Sean Payton, he can get them that extra 10% and plus and get them over the hump. So that's my hot take for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to come watch this episode of the Broncos Breakdown. We'll see you guys later. Grade Denver's wide receiver room for me in the comment section below. What are we thinking? A, B, C, D, or F? Raheem Brown is giving it an A. Like, I don't think it can get an A because the Bengals get an A because they have 2 number ones in my eyes, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Denver, on paper, kind of has 2 number ones in Jerry Jeudy, a first-round pick, and Courtland Sutton, who is paid more or less like a number 1. I mean, not quite, but not very far off. Unfortunately, we just have not seen either player really live up to the draft pick or the contract. So for that reason, I'm inclined to leave them at a B, but they could skyrocket to an A if these guys look like the former Blitnikoff winner Jerry Jeudy and the former 1,000-yard receiver in his second year out of SMU, Courtland Sutton. And you're not asking to move mountains to get those guys to get to those levels, but they're not there right now. That's the reality. They're not there right now, but they can get there. And if they do, this is an A wide receiver room because then you toss in Tim Patrick, the glue guy, if you will, and Marvin Mims to stretch the field, and a very deep wide receiver room with guys like Jalen Virgil and Brandon Johnson, Marquez Callaway, a couple of UDFAs that have NFL experience in the regular season. We've got Will saying B-, but A- upside. Okay. Garrett Ringy says C- to B+. That's quite the range right there. We've got Raheem Brown. I believe Tim Patrick, best wide receiver we have. Tim Patrick definitely does not get enough love and airtime because he has been one of the most consistent pieces in this offense up until last season. The guy was more or less kind of a touchdown machine, right? He has more touchdowns since of any Broncos wide receiver since Jerry Jeudy joined the team in 2020, right? But unfortunately, there is a big question mark as to how he will look coming off that ACL tear. So fingers crossed, but there's not a long history of players the first year back after an ACL injury looking like they did pre-ACL injury. You can just go and talk to Courtland Sutton about that, unfortunately. Now, before we get on out of here, we do have some questions to answer. So, hey, hashtag Broncos in the chat right now. If you want to skip the line, super chat, we guarantee a spot on screen. Those are always appreciated. But let's get to our first question coming in from Keanu. Thoughts on Broncos trying out Mark Gilbert? I did not see this Mark Gilbert tryout, so you caught me because I'd like to think I'm usually pretty well prepared. But Mark Gilbert, happened an hour ago. Okay. We probably just started the show by then. USFL star defensive back Mark Gilbert. Thoughts on it? I don't have anything too in-depth other than 90-man roster. You just got a guy suspended for a full season. That means you have an open roster spot. So I'm sure every single team has a whiteboard with a bunch of magnets on it of guys who are still free agents and go, if for whatever reason a spot opens up, whether it's a suspension or whether it's an injury, we're going to go to our first guy on the whiteboard. And that was Mark Gilbert for Denver. But as for cornerback, I don't think you can look at that and read too much into the position because does Denver need another corner? Not necessarily, but you're not trying to fill out the rest of your roster by the 90th guy. You're just looking for overall talent. You're just looking for a lottery ticket that hits. whatever position that comes at, awesome. So those are my, 2, 3, 4 cents, if you will, on Mark Gilbert. John E., what's going on? What will be the average passing and rushing yards per game? Kind of tough off the top of my head. Passing, I'm going to say, here, Tex, could you get your calculator out for me on your phone, please? If Russell Wilson averages 260 yards a game, what's that times 17? Yeah, I'm going to guess 3,800. 4,420. 260 times 17. Okay, that seems a bit high then. So how about 240 yards per game? That is okay. So I'm gonna go 2,000. I'm gonna go with Russell Wilson tosses 230 yards per game and rushing yards per game as a team, because I think it's going to be a collective effort early on as Javonte Williams works himself back. 115 yards per game. I don't think they're going to be one of the top 3 rushing offenses, but the Bucs and the Rams last year, they averaged about 65 to 75 yards per game. So that's kind of the low end. They'll be ahead of that by a good stretch in my eyes, especially with Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey. So 120 yards per game. You get 230-ish from Russell Wilson and through the air. You're right around, 400 yards per game, somewhere in that neighborhood. But John E., thank you so much for the question. Appreciate it. We got Salgado next up on the show. How about when you reach 20,000 subs, box the KC guy, Harrison Graham? Harry is a big fella. I mean, we're both big guys. Boxing Harry, I'd have to talk to him about that. I don't know if I could verbally sign him up for it, but I don't know if I have a real issue. I do wonder how my boss would feel about it. That feels like some paperwork would have to be signed. But I like where your head's at, Salgado. That'd be a lot of fun. Hopefully we get to 20,000 subs right around the time. Hopefully we get there tomorrow. That's probably not going to happen. Unless 6,000 people watching right now are dying to subscribe. Hopefully we get there right around when Denver plays Kansas City, because that could be a fun little battle to do throughout the weekend. We'll figure out some prize for the winner at the end. But Salgado, appreciate the suggestion. I don't dislike it. Uncancelable. Yeah, uncancelable. Should the Broncos make at least one offer to get Chase Young and or a defensive edge? Should they? Maybe. Will they? Probably not. I don't think Denver is looking to give up more assets for Chase Young unless they believe Chase Young is going to be an all-pro type player like we all did when he came out of Ohio State, and they can get him for pennies on the dollar for what it costs to get that caliber player, where usually you need a top 10 pick in the draft, because going into the draft, everyone's got a first-round pick, but not every single player that goes in the first round is believed to be a Pro Bowl player, an All-Pro player, a Hall of Fame player, a franchise player. So Chase Young had the markings of, hey, you're not just going to be a Pro Bowl player, you're going to be an All-Pro player, right? Whereas that's not the case for every first defensive end taken in every draft. Just like how not every first quarterback taken in the draft is going to be a Pro Bowl player, right? Trevor Lawrence was deemed an All-Pro type player. Kenny Pickett, not the same. What do they have in common? They are both the first quarterbacks taken. So if Denver believes Chase Young can be that type of player and they have that kind of grade on him, and Washington is only asking for a second rounder, well, Denver could go, that's too good a value to pass on because we have a all-pro type grade on him, and you don't find all-pro players in the second round very often. So we just can't pass up on that opportunity. But if they don't have a super high grade on him, I don't know if they are itching to move on from more assets after moving on from a bunch to get Russell Wilson, a bunch to get Sean Payton, and then even a third-round pick for next year's draft to move up and get Riley Moss. At some point, I'm sure George Payton would go, let me draft my own Chase Young, right? That way, I don't have to give up more picks to get him, because if it doesn't work out, I'm getting fired. So I like the idea. It's a lot of fun for sure to go out and get someone like Chase Young. I have no idea what the rest of his career holds, because the last 2 years have been, underwhelming due to injury. Haven't seen him a whole lot. So for that reason, I'd probably pass because I assume it would cost a first-rounder to get him, and I don't want to see Denver give up another first-round pick. Garrett Ringy, if we traded or cut KJ Hamler, what can we get for him? Well, you're not going to get anything if you cut him. But if you trade KJ Hamler, I'll be honest, 7th rounder, that's the best I can do for you. Like N'Keal Harry last year, former first-round pick for the Patriots, he went to the Bears for a future 7th-round pick. That's kind of a baseline for what you could get for KJ Hamler. And that's probably why Denver isn't looking to trade KJ Hamler, because they go, well, we could maybe get a 7th, and that'll amount to nothing. Or we could maybe hold out and hope that he lives up to that 2nd-round potential, and that's a higher upside than what that 7th-round pick is going to be. So I don't think you're going to get a whole lot for Hamler. I hate to disappoint, but if you're hoping to get a big pick back because he's a former 2nd-rounder, he's gone through a lot of injuries. I don't know any team that would touch him with a 10-foot pole because they just view him as damaged goods, and it's just not worth their own time to give up a pick, bring him over, and unfortunately, he likely gets injured with their team. That's just been the track record for KJ Hamler, unfortunately. Broncos edits. Hey, Matt, it's Nolan Tipton. What's going on, man? My question for you is, do you think Sean Payton can fix Russ, and why do you think people are sweeping us under the rug? That's the million-dollar question. And if I had the answer for that question definitively, well, we would know how this season would go. But if Sean Payton does indeed fix Russell Wilson, or at least restore Russell Wilson, this team could win 10-plus games, right? This team won 5 games last year with horrible quarterback play and horrible coaching. You improve those 2 elements, the most important elements to being successful in the regular season, 10-plus wins. Do I think Sean Payton can do that? I think he is capable of doing it. Will he do it? I hate to be Switzerland here. I don't know. If I'm a betting man, I don't think the fix is going to be as dramatic as maybe some of the more diehards believe it will be. I think you're going to see a big improvement for 2 reasons. One, the bar is so low. The guy threw 16 touchdowns last year, right? Getting over 20 touchdowns would be like a 25% increase, which is a big number to increase your touchdowns. So the bar is not very high. The second reason is I am a believer in Sean Payton is a very good NFL coach. And very good coaches tend to win more often than they lose. So I can subscribe to the idea of Sean Payton coming in here and improving this team. And it might not be through Russell Wilson going back to his old days, right? It might be through just better play calling, better coaching altogether, and just dragging this team, despite maybe not elite quarterback play, to 7, 8, 9 wins, or maybe even 10, even if Russ is not fixed by Sean Payton. I think Sean Payton is capable of winning a lot of games, despite maybe Russ's potential poor play this upcoming year. Why are people sweeping Denver under the rug? They won 5 games last year. Like, do they have a lot of talent on this roster? Absolutely. But they won 5 games last year, and they routinely get injured. And unfortunately, they've just been a bit of an eyesore in prime time. Like, this has not been a team that people look forward to seeing on Monday Night Football outside of Broncos country. No other part of the country is like, we need more Broncos primetime. So you kind of start associating Denver primetime. That Colts game sucked. They're going to suck. I don't want to see more of them. Sweep them under the rug. Juwan Powell, this will be the last question unless we get a super chat, and then we'll keep the show going. What is your confidence level that we beat Kansas City in at least 1 game this season? Scale of 1 to 10. 10 being it's a fact, it's going to happen, no doubt. 1 being 0% chance. I am at a 4. I'm at the stage of I think it's more unlikely than likely, but a 4 could be a half glass full, half glass empty kind of thing because it's hard to buy in other than just hoping, right? Other than just like your heart wanting that to be the thing and just speaking it into existence. I don't have any tape. I don't have any real reasoning to go into the fact that you're going to beat him other than last year Patrick Mahomes played a bit shaky against a bad Denver team at the time. So if Denver's good and you get that bad Mahomes game again, maybe the Broncos actually win that game and complete the comeback. So I'm at a 4. I'm at a 4, Juwan. I'm sorry I couldn't be a bit higher, but that's the honest truth. That will do it for us on today's live show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your Tuesday to come hang out with us. We will sign off. We'll see you all throughout the summer for training camp updates and preseason recaps and whatnot before the regular season. If you have not liked the video, go ahead and do so. Subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll sign off and see you guys later.